My wife said, "I don't owe you anything." And in that moment, our 15 years together just vanished. It wasn't a fight, not an argument, not even a raised voice. Just a quiet, dismissive statement that wiped away everything we'd built. The words themselves hit me like a physical blow, a cold, empty feeling in my chest. But it was the way she said them, so casually, so devoid of emotion, that truly shattered something inside me. We were sitting at the kitchen table, just after dinner, talking about some routine household chore, some small request I had made. Nothing important, nothing contentious. Yet those 6 words defined the end of an era. I didn't yell. I didn't even speak. I just sat there, looking at her, watching her gather the dishes without a second thought. For a moment I considered arguing, pleading, asking what she meant, but something stopped me. A switch flipped. All the effort, all the years of compromise, of always being the dependable one, the fixer, the one who tried to make things right, it all just drained away. I got up, cleared my plate, and went into the living room. That night, I slept on the couch. It wasn't an act of defiance, not really. It was more like an internal surrender. I had always been the one who managed everything. From organizing our finances to making dinner most nights. From fixing the leaky faucet to remembering her mother's birthday. I took pride in being that husband, the rock, the guy she could always count on. But her words, "I don't owe you anything," made me realize that my efforts had simply become expected, not appreciated. They weren't a contribution to our partnership. They were just something she felt entitled to. So I stopped. I didn't make a big show of it. I just stopped doing things that weren't strictly my own responsibility. I stopped initiating conversations about our future. I stopped suggesting weekend plans. I stopped asking her about her day with genuine curiosity. When she left her clothes on the floor, they stayed there. When the dishwasher needed emptying, I waited to see if she would do it. More often than not, she did not. At first, she didn't seem to notice. Or if she did, she attributed it to me being quiet or tired. Our mornings, which used to involve a quick hug or a shared coffee, became silent affairs. I'd make my own breakfast, get ready, and leave for work. She'd do the same. The house, which once felt warm and lived in, began to feel like a shared apartment, 2 separate lives running parallel. A few days into this new routine, or lack thereof, she started to get annoyed. "Did you forget to pick up the dry cleaning?" she'd ask, her tone laced with irritation. I'd simply reply, "No, I just didn't pick it up." There was no explanation, no apology, just a statement of fact. She'd huff, roll her eyes, and go do it herself. The mild annoyance slowly started to morph into something else, a flicker of confusion, perhaps even a hint of alarm in her eyes. The dependable husband had gone quiet. I also stopped initiating any kind of physical affection. No more casual touches, no more hand-holding during movies, no more morning kisses. It was a conscious decision, a way for me to process the emotional distance her words had created. I needed to see if she would bridge the gap. She didn't. Instead, her own interactions became more guarded. She'd bring her phone to bed with her, something she hadn't done before. She'd angle it away from me, her thumb constantly scrolling. One evening, about 2 weeks after the comment, she announced she was going out with friends. This wasn't unusual, but her tone was different, more declarative, less conversational. "I'm meeting Sarah for drinks. Might be late." I simply nodded. "Okay, have fun." She paused, as if waiting for me to ask where or when she'd be back, or even to offer a casual, "Be safe." When I didn't, she just shrugged and left. She came home well after midnight. I was awake, but pretended to be asleep. The next morning, she didn't mention it. Her phone became a constant companion. It used to be left on the counter, charging, during dinner or movie nights. Now it was always with her, often face down or clutched in her hand. If I walked into the room and she was on it, she'd quickly minimize whatever was on the screen. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but after 15 years, I knew her habits. This was new. This was a change. I found myself watching her more closely, not out of suspicion yet, but out of a desperate attempt to understand. To understand how someone could say, "I don't owe you anything," to a partner they'd built a life with. I saw a guardedness in her eyes, a slight tension around her mouth that hadn't been there before. She seemed distracted, often lost in thought, only to snap back to attention if I spoke to her. The warmth, the ease, the comfort that had once defined our interactions had evaporated, replaced by a polite distance. Her work schedule, which had always been fairly predictable, started to shift. She was staying late more often, meetings ran over, had to finish a project. The explanations were always vague, always delivered with a casual air that felt forced. I never questioned them. I simply said, "Okay," and went about my evening. I'd make dinner for one, watch TV alone, and go to bed. The first real crack in her facade, the first undeniable sign that something was truly amiss, came one Tuesday evening. She called me around 6 p.m. "Hey, I'm going to be really late tonight. Last-minute thing with work. Don't wait up." Her voice was a little too cheerful, a little too rehearsed. I remember the exact phrasing, because it was almost identical to a line from a movie we'd watched years ago, a character making an excuse. I didn't press. I just said, "All right, text me when you're on your way home." She agreed, a little too quickly. I cooked myself a steak, poured a glass of wine, and turned on the TV. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from a mutual friend, Mark. "Hey man, ran into wife's name at the new Italian place downtown. She was with a few people from work. Looked like a good time. Tell her I said hi." My blood ran cold. The last-minute thing with work was a casual dinner, not a meeting, not finishing a project. A casual dinner, but she had felt the need to lie about it. And she hadn't mentioned Mark. Why lie about something so innocuous, unless it wasn't innocuous? I stared at the message, a slow, sickening realization forming in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't about me stopping my efforts anymore. This was about her, and something else entirely. The text from Mark sat on my screen, a small, innocent string of words that had just detonated a silent bomb inside me. "Saw Clara last night at the Anchor. Good crowd, looked like she was having a good time with her work folks." The Anchor was a popular casual pub downtown. Clara had told me she was working late on a last-minute project, not meeting colleagues for a casual dinner. Definitely not having a good time. My first reaction was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Then came the analysis. Why lie? Why not just say she was going for drinks with coworkers? We weren't arguing about her social life. In fact, we weren't arguing at all. This wasn't a lie to avoid a fight. It was a lie to conceal. Conceal what? The image of her guarding her phone, the sudden unpredictability of her schedule, the dismissive tone she'd adopted, it all started to coalesce into something darker. The "I don't owe you anything" wasn't a sudden outburst. It was a statement of intent. I didn't confront her. My new operating principle was to observe, not react. My silence was a new and potent weapon, one she clearly hadn't anticipated. She was used to my predictable responses. Concern, a little frustration, then, ultimately, my stepping in to fix whatever needed fixing. Now there was nothing. Just a quiet void where my efforts used to be. The following days were a peculiar dance. I maintained my minimal engagement. I cooked dinner for myself, cleaned my own dishes, handled my own laundry. I didn't ask about her day or offer help with anything. I was present but absent, a ghost in my own home. Clara, initially, seemed to brush it off. She'd sigh dramatically if I didn't offer to take out the trash she'd left by the door, or leave her dirty clothes on the floor near the hamper, almost daring me to pick them up. I didn't. Her phone use, already elevated, became almost constant. It was an extension of her hand. She'd bring it to the kitchen counter while making coffee, prop it up next to her plate at dinner, carry it to the bathroom. Always face down, always muted. If I walked into a room, her thumb would instinctively swipe, minimizing whatever she was looking at. The flicker of the screen became a constant, subliminal message of secrecy. One evening she came home later than usual. I was already in bed, reading. She showered, and I heard her fumbling around in the bathroom for a while, longer than normal. When she finally came to bed, she smelled different. Not her usual shampoo or body wash. It was a faint, unfamiliar scent, floral, but with an almost metallic undercurrent. I pretended to be asleep, listening to her quiet movements. She slid into bed, on her side, facing away from me, and I heard the faint click of her phone as she checked it one last time before putting it on the nightstand, face down. I found myself analyzing every small detail. Her demeanor was sharper, her patience thinner. She'd snap at me over minor things, then immediately soften, almost testing my reaction. When I offered no reaction, she'd become visibly frustrated. It was as if she was trying to provoke an argument, any argument, just to break the suffocating quiet I had imposed. It was a quiet that I now realized was entirely her own making. Her explanations for her late nights became even more vague. Work stuff. Things came up. She stopped even trying to sound convincing. One night, she didn't come home until close to midnight. She sent a text at 8 p.m. saying she was still at the office, Project Crunch. But when she arrived, her hair was freshly washed, and she was wearing a different outfit than what she'd worn that morning. She'd also changed her shoes. I remembered the distinctive pair she'd worn that morning, a specific set of boots she liked. Now she had on trainers. It was an odd detail, seemingly minor, but it gnawed at me. Why change clothes and shoes if she was at the office? Did she go home first? But then why the late arrival? It didn't add up. The next morning, I noticed a small, bright red scratch on the back of her hand as she reached for her coffee. It looked fresh, not old. She quickly turned her hand away as if she hadn't noticed my gaze. A few days later, while she was showering, I casually checked the mileage on her car. It was just a glance at the dashboard, a habit I used to have when we planned trips. I remembered the number from a few days ago, and it seemed significantly higher than expected, given her stated commute and recent activities. It was a stretch, I knew, but everything was adding up to a pattern of deception. I started to pay closer attention to her spending. Our bank accounts were still joint, and we had always been open about our finances. But now, I noticed a few small, recurring charges. Coffee shops near areas that weren't on her direct commute. A casual restaurant I didn't recognize, frequented twice in a month. These weren't huge amounts, just small deductions, the kind you might not question in a healthy, trusting relationship. But in the context of her guarded phone and evasive explanations, they stood out. The emotional distance between us grew into a chasm. She seemed genuinely bewildered by my lack of response. "What's wrong with you?" she'd blurt out, usually after I failed to anticipate some small need or demand. "You're just different." I'd just meet her gaze, offer no explanation. I didn't feel the need to. She had told me I owed her nothing. I was simply returning the favor. Her attempts to re-engage me were clumsy, almost desperate. She'd try to start a conversation about our future, about house repairs, about old memories. But there was an underlying tension, a forced lightness, that felt profoundly disingenuous. She was testing the waters, trying to see if the old me was still lurking beneath the surface. He wasn't. He was gone, replaced by someone who was quietly, methodically, putting the pieces together. One Saturday, she announced she had to go to a, quote, mandatory all-day training session for work. It was unusual for a weekend, and she seemed overly emphatic about it being, quote, mandatory. She left early, dressed in business casual, carrying her laptop bag. I spent the day doing yard work, trying to distract myself, but my mind kept circling back to her strange behavior. Around lunchtime, I got a text from Mark. "Hey, saw Clara's car parked near the old bookstore cafe, thought she was working today." The old bookstore cafe was a quaint place, popular for its quiet ambiance and good coffee. It was definitely not where her company would hold a mandatory all-day training session. It was in a completely different part of town, far from her office building. My heart began to pound a familiar rhythm of dread. I texted Mark back, asking if he was sure it was her car. He sent a picture. It was her car. Unmistakable. Parked discreetly, a few blocks away from the cafe itself, almost as if someone didn't want it to be easily spotted. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she went there for lunch after the training? But it was nowhere near her office, and she'd insisted it was all day. Why would she go to a cafe so far out of her way, park several blocks away, alone, on a supposed workday? It didn't make sense. And the emphasis on mandatory all-day training felt like an over-explanation, a shield for something else. That night, she arrived home around 6 p.m., looking tired but oddly flushed. She threw her laptop bag onto the couch and immediately went to shower. When she emerged, she gave me a vague, tired account of the long, boring day at the training. She didn't mention the cafe. She didn't mention driving to a different part of town. She just stuck to her story. I felt a sickening wave of disbelief wash over me. She was lying again, and this lie was bigger, bolder. It involved an entire day, an entire fabricated event. The "I don't owe you anything" now felt like a declaration of independence, not from me, but from the truth itself. It wasn't just about her not contributing. It was about her operating in a completely separate reality, one she was actively constructing and protecting. And I was just starting to realize how deep the foundations of that separate reality went. The phone, the late nights, the vague excuses, the changing clothes, the peculiar mileage, the small charges, the perfume, the scratch, the lies to Mark. It was all a tapestry now, woven from threads of deceit, and the weave was getting tighter. The photo Mark sent was a gut punch, not because it revealed her with another man, but because it laid bare the brazenness of her lies. Clara's car, undeniably hers, was parked on a side street near the old bookstore cafe in the historic district. That was nowhere near her office, and definitely not the kind of place a mandatory all-day training session would be held. The cafe was known for its quiet, intimate nooks, not corporate seminars. My mind immediately went to the small, recurring charges on our joint account, the coffee shops and casual restaurants not on her usual commute. This cafe fit the profile perfectly. It wasn't just a lie about where she was. It was a lie about what she was doing and why. The "I don't owe you anything" resonated louder than ever, no longer just a shield for her lack of effort, but a declaration of complete independence from our shared reality. I took a deep breath, the cold, analytical part of me kicking into overdrive. The game had changed. I wasn't just observing her neglect. I was investigating a systematic deception. I needed to move beyond suspicion and gather facts, undeniable ones. My first step was subtle, almost subconscious, a new habit I began cultivating. Every time I drove the car, which was mostly mine to begin with, I noted the odometer reading. And when Clara took it, I'd make a mental note, then check again when she returned. It wasn't immediate proof of anything, but over a week the numbers began to tell a story. Her explanations for distances traveled rarely matched the mileage. A supposed quick trip to the grocery store would log an extra 10 miles. A work errand might add 20. She was driving places she wasn't telling me about, or taking ridiculously circuitous routes. The financial records became my next target. I pulled up our joint credit card statements and bank accounts online, scrolling through months of transactions. The small charges for coffee shops and casual eateries were there, as expected. But now, with a new lens, I noticed patterns. Specific days, specific times. These places were clustered around the historic district, where Mark saw her car, or other areas equally out of the way for her normal routine. There was a florist, a small independent one, with a charge from a few weeks back. It wasn't near our house, nor near her office, and I certainly hadn't received flowers. She wasn't the type to buy herself flowers, not from a pricey boutique like that. There was also a charge for a small, trendy boutique I didn't recognize, another one for a gift shop. These weren't for me, and we weren't in the habit of exchanging casual gifts. The amounts weren't huge, but they accumulated. suggesting a separate stream of personal expenditure, hidden in plain sight amidst our joint finances. I started to notice more about her phone. She always had it, face down, or clutched tight. But sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, or if she was distracted, I'd catch glimpses, not of messages, never messages, but of her general habits. She spent a surprising amount of time on certain messaging apps I didn't recognize, not the standard iMessage or WhatsApp, but others, perhaps more private or less common. She also had an unusual number of apps hidden in folders, apps that didn't seem to fit her usual interests. Once, she left her laptop open, and when I walked by, I noticed a separate browser window open, minimized, with a tab titled Gmail Personal that wasn't connected to her work or our shared email. It was a fleeting glimpse, but it planted another seed of doubt. Why a separate, hidden personal email, when all her legitimate personal correspondence went through her main account? The small details around the house also started to stand out. Her car keys, which she used to toss onto the kitchen counter, were now often tucked away in her purse or on her bedside table. Her purse itself was rarely left unattended. I noticed she started wearing a specific, new perfume, one I'd never smelled on her before, a scent that was both floral and slightly musky, but undeniably different from her usual choices. It was faint, often masked by other smells, but I'd catch it sometimes, especially when she came home later than usual. It reminded me of the floral/metallic scent from the earlier incident, though I couldn't be certain it was the same. The scratch on her hand, the one I'd dismissed, became a nagging thought. She'd explained it away as a paper cut, but it had been deeper. A bright red line, almost like a nail scratch. I started paying closer attention to her clothes. She used to have a rotation of comfortable, practical outfits for work and weekends. Now she was buying new things, dresses that were a little too dressy for her office, new shoes, lingerie. They weren't extravagant purchases, but they represented a shift, a desire to present herself differently. But for whom? Not for me, certainly, as our intimacy had long since withered. I found myself increasingly using Mark as an innocent source of information. I never explicitly asked him to spy, but I'd casually bring up Clara. "Hey, did Clara mention that training session she had the other Saturday?" I asked him over beers one evening. Mark shrugged. "Nah, not really. She said something about having a busy week coming up, but nothing specific about a training." "Why?" I just shook my head. "Oh, no reason, just checking." Another time, I mentioned the Anchor Pub. "Have you been there recently, Mark?" "Clara said she was there with some work people." Mark frowned. "Oh yeah, she was. I actually popped in there for a quick one with a colleague a few weeks ago, and saw her. She looked like she was having a good time. Said she was meeting a client." He paused. Actually, she seemed a little surprised to see me. I simply nodded, the pieces slotting into place. She hadn't wanted him to know she was there, or, more precisely, she hadn't wanted him to confirm her presence there no year. To me, the lie wasn't just about the location. It was about the purpose and the company. My observations weren't just about what Clara was doing, but also about what she wasn't doing. She wasn't engaging with me. She wasn't asking about my day. Our conversations became purely transactional, household logistics, bills, or brief, superficial remarks about the weather. The emotional void between us widened, a chasm she seemed increasingly comfortable with. Her attempts to provoke a reaction had ceased, replaced by a quiet, almost smug self-containment. She was living a life parallel to mine, and her "I don't owe you anything" was the operating principle of that life. One evening, I returned home from work a little earlier than usual. Clara's car was in the driveway. I walked in quietly. The house was silent. I went to our bedroom to change, and that's when I saw it. On her nightstand, half hidden under a book, was a small, cream-colored gift box from the boutique whose charge I'd seen on the statement. It was open. Inside, nestled on tissue paper, was a tie clip. A silver tie clip, simple and elegant. It wasn't mine. I never wore tie clips. I didn't even own a tie that required one. My breath hitched. This wasn't ambiguous. This wasn't a coffee charge or extra mileage or a guarded phone. This was a gift, bought for a man who was not me. And it was hidden, almost carelessly, right there in our bedroom. My hands felt cold, a familiar numbness spreading through my chest. The truth, in all its bitter clarity, was beginning to solidify. It wasn't just about her independence, or her lack of contribution. It was about another person. The phone, the late nights, the vague excuses, the changing clothes, the peculiar mileage, the small charges, the expensive perfume, the scratch, the lies to Mark, the separate email, the hidden apps, the bookstore cafe. It was all a prelude to this. The tie clip was the crescendo, a tangible, irrefutable sign that Clara had not just checked out of our marriage, but had actively started building a new life, a new connection with someone else. And she had the audacity, or perhaps the callousness, to hide the evidence of it just steps from where I slept. The "I don't owe you anything" now rang with a chilling finality. It meant she didn't owe me fidelity, honesty, or even a basic respect for our shared life. She owed me nothing, because she had already given herself and her loyalty to someone else. The only question now was, how far had it gone? And who was he? The silver tie clip in the gift box felt like the final piece of a puzzle I hadn't wanted to solve. It wasn't a question of if anymore, only who and how deep. The feeling wasn't anger, not in the way I used to feel it, but a deep, numbing coldness that settled in my bones. I put the box back exactly as I found it. Clara was still out, likely finishing whatever she had started earlier. My mind, usually a jumble of emotions and doubts, was now eerily clear. I needed to know. I spent the next hour meticulously reviewing everything, the small charges on the joint account for coffee shops and a casual restaurant in the historic district, the florist, the trendy boutique, the gift shop. All those places were clustered around the old bookstore cafe Mark had sent me a picture of. It pointed to a specific part of town, a little bubble where Clara was building a life I wasn't part of. The opportunity came a few nights later. Clara was in the shower, and her laptop was on the kitchen counter, screen dark but not fully shut down. I knew her password. For years, it had been our anniversary date. I hesitated for only a second. My principles, my sense of privacy, those things had belonged to a different marriage, a different Clara. This Clara had made it clear she owed me nothing, and in that vacuum I realized I owed her privacy even less. I opened it. The Gmail personal tab was still there, but it was just a blank inbox. I clicked the search bar, feeling a detached curiosity rather than fear. I typed in cafe, then bookstore. Nothing. I scrolled through the recent sent emails, then the trash. Still nothing obvious. Then, an older email, dated about a month back, caught my eye. It was a confirmation for a hotel booking, a weekend stay in a town about 2 hours away. It was for 2 people. My heart didn't race. It just thudded, a dull, heavy beat. The date was for the same weekend Clara had claimed to be on a mandatory all-day training session that extended into Sunday. And the booking was under her name and a second name, David Miller. The name wasn't familiar, but I knew immediately it was him, the man the tie clip was for. The man she was spending her Saturday training with. The one she bought new clothes and perfume for. The realization wasn't a sudden shock, but a chilling validation of everything I'd observed. My eyes scanned for more, for pictures, for details. I found a few emails from David Miller to Clara, short, casual, suggesting lunch or catching up. One subject line read, "Looking forward to seeing you at the Anchor tonight." Mark's sighting of Clara there, claiming she was meeting a client, suddenly clicked into place with horrifying precision. She wasn't just having lunch, she was meeting him for drinks, probably more. The work folks she mentioned, the client, all lies. I closed the laptop, logged out and put it back exactly as I found it. Clara emerged from the shower a few minutes later, smelling of her new, distinct perfume. She looked at me, a hint of expectation in her eyes, probably hoping for some reaction, some sign of the old me. But I just offered a small, neutral nod. The woman standing before me, showering off a life I didn't recognize, was a stranger. That night, I moved my things to the guest room. I didn't say anything, just did it. When Clara came to bed and found my side empty, she came to the guest room door. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice laced with confusion, maybe even a touch of fear. "I'm sleeping in here," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. "Why?" she pressed, her voice rising slightly. "Is this about what I said? I told you, I'm just stressed with work. I didn't mean anything by it." "It's about everything, Clara," I said, looking at her directly for the first time in weeks. "It's about the lies, the distance, the other life you've been building." Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, trying to play dumb, but her eyes darted nervously. "David Miller," I stated simply. "The hotel booking, the anchor, the old bookstore cafe, the tie clip, the perfume, the mileage on the car, the hidden emails. It's all very clear, Clara. You haven't just checked out of our marriage. You've packed your bags and moved on." She stood there, speechless, her shoulders slumped. The carefully constructed facade of indignation and denial crumbled in an instant. Her eyes welled up, but I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a deep, profound emptiness. This wasn't the Clara I married. This was a woman who had systematically dismantled our life together, piece by piece, under the cover of secrecy and contempt. She started, her voice breaking. "It's not what you think. It's complicated." "No, it's not," I interrupted, my voice still calm, almost academic. "It's actually very simple. You told me you don't owe me anything. And you've spent the last few months proving it. You don't owe me honesty, you don't owe me fidelity, and you certainly don't owe me explanations anymore." The silence in the room was deafening. It stretched, thick and suffocating. Clara started to cry, silent tears streaming down her face. She looked devastated, but the devastation felt too late, too performative, a reaction to being caught, rather than to genuine remorse for what she had done to us. My heart remained a stone. "I think it's time for us to separate, Clara," I said, the words feeling foreign yet entirely right. "I'll make arrangements to find a place. We can talk about the house and everything else once I've moved out." She didn't argue, she didn't plead. She just stared at me, perhaps seeing the man she had slowly suffocated, now resurrected, but entirely unreachable to her. The man who had been taken for granted, the dependable one, was gone, and in his place was someone who finally understood what it meant to owe nothing. The next few weeks were a blur of practicalities. I found a small apartment downtown, closer to work. We spoke through lawyers about the house and finances. Clara tried a few times to talk to me, to explain, to apologize, but her words felt hollow. They were apologies for getting caught, not for betraying everything we had built. My detachment remained. It was a shield, but also a new way of being. I packed my belongings, the things that were mine, the things I had bought or cherished independently. As I loaded the last box into my car, I looked back at the house, at the life I had shared with Clara for 15 years. It felt like another lifetime. The phrase "I don't owe you anything" still echoed in my mind, but its meaning had transformed entirely. It wasn't just her statement of independence or a casual dismissal of my needs. It was her declaration of a new reality, one she had already begun to live. She didn't owe me anything, because she had already invested her loyalty and affection elsewhere. And in her cruel clarity, she had inadvertently given me a gift, the understanding that I too owed her nothing. Not my pain, not my anger, not my forgiveness. Just a quiet, dignified exit. The dependable husband was gone. and what remained was a man finally free from the burden of an unbalanced ledger, ready to build a new life, beholden to no one but himself.